What happens when Hollywood's toughest legend meets daytime television's most outspoken liberal voice? You're about to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history, where Clint Eastwood's demeanor finally cracks under relentless provocation, leading to a dramatic exit that left the studio in stunned silence. This is the story of how a routine promotional interview became a verbal Satterfield. The morning began like any other at the View's Manhattan studio. Clint Eastwood had agreed to appear to promote his latest directorial effort, a character study about aging and redemption in small-town America. At 94, the legendary filmmaker and actor remained sharp and commanding, his weathered face carrying decades of Hollywood experience. Producers assured his team it would be a straightforward interview about his career and new project. As cameras rolled for the live broadcast, Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with her warm introduction. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a true Hollywood legend with us today. Please welcome the one and only Clint Eastwood." The audience erupted in applause as Eastwood walked onto the set, his posture still commanding despite his age. He settled into the guest chair with quiet confidence. "Clint, thank you so much for being here." Whoopi continued respectfully. "Your new film has been getting incredible reviews. Tell us what drew you to this story." Eastwood leaned forward slightly, his familiar gravelly tone capturing attention. "Well, Whoopi, it's a story about second chances, about people finding meaning in the later chapters of their lives. I've always been drawn to characters who face their demons and come out stronger." Sarah Haynes chimed in enthusiastically. "The themes in your films resonate across generations. What do you hope people take away from this one?" "I hope they understand that it's never too late to make things right," Eastwood replied, eyes moving across the panel. "Whether you're 20 or 90, you can still choose to be better than you were yesterday." Sunny host nodded approvingly. "That's such a powerful message, especially today, when it often feels like people can't change or grow." The conversation flowed naturally for the first few minutes. Alyssa Farah Griffin asked about his directing process, and Anna Navarro inquired about working with the young cast. Eastwood answered thoughtfully, showing the precision of decades spent perfecting his craft. But Joy Behar had been unusually quiet, her expression growing more pointed. Those familiar with the show knew this was rarely a good sign. Known for sharp political commentary, Joy didn't hold back when topics sparked her passion. "Clint," Joy interjected, her voice cutting through the atmosphere. "Speaking of second chances, what's your take on the current political climate? Do certain politicians deserve second chances after, shall we say, controversial actions?" The question hung in the air. Eastwood's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened subtly. He had long avoided overtly political discussions, preferring to let his work speak for itself. "Joy, I'm here to talk about my film," Eastwood replied evenly, his voice carrying a recognizable warning. "I've always believed that artists should focus on their art, not on telling people how to think politically." Joy's eyes lit up with combative energy. "But surely you have opinions about what's happening in our country. Your films have political undertones. Don't artists have a responsibility to speak out?" Whoopi quickly tried to shift the conversation. "Maybe we should talk about the technical aspects of filmmaking. Clint, you've been directing for over 50 years. Joy wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a confrontational edge. "Clint, silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Someone with your platform should address serious issues facing our democracy." Eastwood's eyes narrowed. For a moment, the studio fell silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the quiet intensity that made him compelling on screen. "Joy, I've spent my entire career telling stories that explore the human condition. I believe in letting people think for themselves, rather than lecturing them about what they should believe." The tension in the studio was palpable. Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably in her seat, while Sunny host glanced between Joy and Clint with growing concern. Even the usually unflappable Whoopi seemed to realize the situation was slipping out of control. Joy, however, appeared energized by the confrontation. "But don't you think that's a privileged position to take? Some of us can't remain silent when democracy itself is under attack," she pressed. Eastwood's response was measured but firm. "I think democracy is best served when people hear different perspectives and make up their own minds, not when they're told what to think by entertainers, whether actors or talk show hosts." The comment hit its mark, and Joy's face flushed with indignation. The battle lines were clearly drawn. Everyone in the studio sensed they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Are you seriously suggesting I don't have the right to express my political views?" Joy shot back. "That's rich, coming from someone who made a career playing vigilante characters who take the law into their own hands." The audience stirred uncomfortably. Eastwood's expression hardened. His voice, cold and steel-like, cut through the tension. "Joy, there's a difference between expressing views and using your platform to berate guests who come here in good faith to discuss their work. I've never claimed my characters represent how people should behave. They're stories, not political manifestos." Anna Navarro tried to diffuse the situation. "Perhaps we could discuss how your films have evolved over the decades. Your recent work shows incredible nuance in exploring complex moral issues." But Joy didn't back down. complex moral issues like glorifying violence and toxic masculinity. Your movies have peddled the same outdated cowboy fantasy for decades while real people suffer from gun violence and inequality. The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Alyssa Farah Griffin winced, and Sarah Haynes seemed to want to disappear into her chair. Even Whoopi, seasoned in navigating controversy, looked stunned by Joy's directness. Eastwood's voice remained steady but carried a sharper edge now. Joy, I think you're confusing entertainment with reality. My films explore the consequences of violence, not glorify it. As for toxic masculinity, I've spent the last 20 years making movies about men learning to be vulnerable, facing their failures, and finding redemption through compassion rather than force. Please, Joy shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. That's just Hollywood liberal guilt trying to rehabilitate your image. You can't spend 40 years making shoot first, ask questions later movies and then claim you're some kind of sensitive artist. Sunny Host interjected, trying to restore balance. Joy, we should acknowledge that Clint's later work, like $1 Million Baby and Gran Torino, have shown real evolution in exploring themes of redemption and human connection. Joy turned to Sunny with irritation. You're being way too generous. Gran Torino was just another white savior narrative wrapped in pretty cinematography. And don't get me started on how his political views have influenced his storytelling. Eastwood's patience was thinning. His hands, resting calmly on the chair's armrests moments ago, now gripped them slightly. Joy, you've made up your mind about me and my work without any interest in actual conversation. I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish here. What I hope to accomplish, Joy said, raising her voice, is to get you to acknowledge that artists have a responsibility to their audiences and society. Instead, you sit there acting like you're above it all. Like decades of perpetuating harmful stereotypes don't matter because you throw in a few scenes of emotional vulnerability. The studio was silent except for the mechanical hum of the cameras. The audience seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene or simply watch this unprecedented meltdown unfold. Production assistants signaled frantically to their supervisors, but no one knew how to stop it. Whoopi made another attempt to regain control. Okay, let's take a breath. Clint, maybe you could tell us about your upcoming projects, something lighter we can focus on. But Eastwood was no longer looking at Whoopi. His steely gaze was fixed directly on Joy. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet menace that had made him one of cinema's most intimidating presences. Joy, I've been in this business for over 60 years. I've worked with directors, actors, and producers across the entire political spectrum. I've never encountered someone so determined to turn a simple conversation into a personal attack. Joy laughed, but it was bitter. Personal attack. I'm trying to have an honest conversation about the impact of your work on American culture. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be making movies anymore. The comment crossed a line. Sarah Haynes gasped audibly, and Anna Navarro shook her head in disbelief. Some audience members murmured disapprovingly. Eastwood stood slowly, his full height commanding attention. At 94, he still possessed the physical presence that had made him a star. The deliberate way he rose sent a clear message. Joy, he said, his voice heavy with authority, I've dealt with difficult people throughout my career, directors who didn't know what they wanted, producers more concerned with money than storytelling, actors who thought the world revolved around them. But I've never encountered someone so fundamentally disrespectful to a guest who came here in good faith. Joy's eyes blazed. Disrespectful. I'm holding you accountable for your choices as an artist. If you can't handle that, maybe you're not the tough guy you pretend to be on screen. The insult filled the room like a vacuum. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked horrified. Sunny Host covered her mouth, and Anna Navarro's head shook so vigorously her earring swayed. Eastwood said nothing at first, simply staring with the cold intensity that made him legendary in Unforgiven, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet each word carried absolute finality. Joy, I've spent my career treating people with respect, regardless of their politics or beliefs. I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, about themes I believe in. Instead, you've turned this into an ideological interrogation designed to embarrass me in front of your audience. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Eastwood raised a hand, silencing her completely. The gesture was commanding. Finalshay seemed to recognize she had pushed too far. I don't need to sit here and be lectured by someone who clearly has no interest in an actual conversation. He continued, his voice growing stronger. I've earned the right to be treated with basic human dignity, something you seem incapable of providing. The studio was silent except for the sound of Eastwood's footsteps as he moved toward the edge of the set. Joy sat frozen, stunned that she had pushed one of Hollywood's most respected figures past his breaking point. But as he reached the edge, she recovered her voice. That's right, just walk away, she called out. Run back to your Hollywood bubble where nobody challenges your outdated worldview. The comment stopped Eastwood. He turned slowly, his weathered face showing disappointment and controlled anger, more intimidating than any outburst. The cameras captured every nuance as he faced the panel one final time. Joy, he said, voice carrying the weight of 7 decades in entertainment. I've worked with some of the most talented and difficult people in Hollywood. I've directed Academy Award winners and unknown actors with equal respect. I've collaborated with writers, cinematographers, and producers who challenged me to be better every day. But in all my years, I've never encountered someone so determined to turn a professional conversation into a personal vendetta. You invited me here under false pretenses and ambushed me with your political agenda. Whoopi made one last attempt to salvage the moment. Clint, please, let's take a breath and reset. We clearly got off on the wrong foot. Eastwood wasn't finished. His gaze swept the panel before returning to Joy. Whoopi, you run a professional show, and I respect that, but you've allowed one person's personal animosity to hijack what should have been a simple interview about storytelling and filmmaking. Sarah Haynes spoke quietly but sincerely. Clint, I want to apologize. This isn't how we normally conduct interviews, and I'm genuinely sorry you've had this experience. Eastwood nodded slightly to Sarah, the first warmth he'd shown since the confrontation began. Sarah, I appreciate that you and the other ladies here have been professional and respectful. His expression hardened again as he turned to Joy. But you, Joy, have shown me exactly who you are. You use your platform not to inform or entertain, but to attack and belittle anyone who doesn't conform to your narrow worldview. Joy's face flushed with a mixture of anger and perhaps embarrassment. I was trying to hold you accountable for your influence on American culture. Artists don't get to hide behind their work when that work has real-world consequences. Accountable, Eastwood said, his voice rising for the first time, though never shouting. Joy, you don't know the first thing about accountability. You sit behind this desk every day and tear down people who have actually built, created, and contributed something meaningful. Anna Navarro attempted to interject. Perhaps we could agree that art and politics intersect in complicated ways that deserve thoughtful discussion. Eastwood shook his head. Anna, you're right, these are complicated issues that deserve thoughtful discussion. But that's not what happened here today. What happened here was an ambush designed to generate controversy at the expense of basic human decency. He turned back to Joy, his voice dropping to that trademark whisper that somehow commanded more attention than any shout. I've spent my career telling stories about redemption, about people finding their way back from darkness, about the possibility of change and growth. But you, Joy, you're so consumed with your own righteousness that you can't see past your own prejudices. My prejudices, Joy snapped. You've been making the same type of movie for 50 years, reinforcing the same toxic stereotypes about masculinity and violence. And you're the one judging me? Eastwood's voice carried finality. You see what you want to see, hear what you want to hear, and attack anyone who dares to suggest the world might be more complicated than your talking points allow. Sunny host made one last attempt. Clint, maybe there's common ground if we communicate more respectfully. Eastwood's expression softened slightly. Sunny, I appreciate your professionalism and attempt to find common ground. But some bridges can't be built when one side is determined to burn them down. He straightened to his full height, revealing the commanding presence that had made him a cinema icon. I came here to talk about a film that explores forgiveness, redemption, and finding meaning in the final chapters of life. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination by someone who made up her mind about me long before I walked through that door. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Eastwood raised a hand, silencing her. I'm done here. Joy, you can have your last word, your clever comeback, your moment of television drama, but I won't be part of it anymore. He began walking toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in stunned silence. Before disappearing, he turned back once, voice carrying across the set. To viewers at home, judge my work on its own merits, not on the opinions of someone more interested in tearing down than building up. And to the professional journalists and hosts who conduct respectful interviews every day, thank you for treating your guests with the dignity that seems to be disappearing from public discourse. With that, Clint Eastwood walked off the set of The View, leaving behind stunned silence and a speechless host. The cameras continued rolling, capturing the moment when Hollywood's legendary tough guy proved that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect is simply refusing to accept it. The aftermath was immediate. Joy sat frozen, stunned. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Whoopi found her voice, attempting closure. Well, that was certainly unexpected. We'll be right back after this break. But the damage was done. In trying to score political points against a respected guest, Joy had instead revealed the ugliness beneath her confrontational style. Clint Eastwood, in his quiet and dignified exit, had reminded everyone watching what true strength really looks like.